Hello, my name is Ray Soriano, and today I will be doing a bone video of the axial skeleton for BIO235 of University College Human Anatomy. Let's begin. Okay, let's focus now on the cranial bones. First we have the frontal. Next we have the parietal. Next we have the occipital. And in the occipital is the external occipital protuberance, which is right there. And this is the bones that consist of a specialized type of dense connective tissue that forms a rigid structure known as osseous tissue designed to support the body. Okay, now we will be doing the temporal external view of the skeleton skull. Let's start off with the temporomandibular joint, which is here. Then we have the mastoid process, right here. Next, you have the styloid process, and you'll see that over here. Next one is the external acoustic meatus, and that is here. Lastly, we have the squamous part, which is here. Alright, let's now focus on the internal view of the skeleton skull. So over here, you will find the petrous part of the temporal bone, and the middle and internal ear cavities are housed within this bone. Over here, you will find the internal acoustic meatus, and the cranial nerves 7 and 8 passes through that opening. Alright, moving on to the sphenoid external view. Alright, over here in this area, or right underneath, about right there up, you will find the superior orbital fissure, and the cranial nerves 3, 4, and 6 passes through that opening. Moving on to the internal view, over here, it's the lesser wing, a greater wing. Then we have the optic canal and the optic nerve and cranial nerve 2 passes through that opening. Lastly, we have the sella turcica, and that's here. And the pituitary gland is the structure that sits in this fossa. Okay, moving on to the ethmoid internal view. Over here, you will find the crista galli, and this helps secure the brain and the cranial cavity. And then over here, that's the cribriform, and the olfactory nerves passes through that hole. Okay, moving on to the sutures. Over here, we have the coronal, and that is made by the frontal and the parietal bones. Over here, we have the sagittal, and that is made by the parietal bones. Then we have the lambdoid, right there, and that is made by the occipital and the parietal bones. Lastly, we have the squamous, and that is made by the temporal and the parietal bones. Okay, moving on to the facial bones. Alright, moving on to the facial bones. Over here, that's the maxilla and the alveolar process. Over here, we have the nasal. Then we have the zygomatic bone right over here. And the zygomatic and the temporal bones are the two bones that form the zygomatic arch. Next, we have the ethmoid right there. Then we have the vomer right in the middle. And the vomer and the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid are the two bones that forms the bony nasal septum. Lastly, we have the inferior nasal concha, and that is right here. There. And this increases the turbulence of the air flowing through the nasal cavity. Okay, moving on to the mandible. The mandible is around this area right here. Let's focus now on the body. The body is right from here to here. Then we got the angle. The angle is right here. Then we got the rhombus right there. Let's now focus on the mandibular condyle. You're looking at it right here. Then we have the mandibular notch right there. And this. Lastly, we have the coronoid process, and that's right there. Okay, moving on to the vertebral column. From here to here, we have the cervical. From here to about here, we have the thoracic. From here to here, we have the lumbar, and then from here to here, we have the sacral. The two primary would be the thoracic and the sacral, and the cervical and the lumbar are secondary. Okay, focusing on the cervical vertebrae, there is 7, and this is the atlas right here. And the question is, what does this bone articulate with from the superior aspect? Demonstrate the motion on yourself that this joint allows. So it's the occipital bone, and basically the motion would be something like this. Next question is, what is unique about the transverse processes of all cervical vertebrae compared to those of thoracic and lumbar vertebrae? Well, each one contains a transverse foramen which houses the vertebral arteries to reach the brain. Okay, now moving on to the thoracic vertebrae. There are 12. Over here is the spinous processes. Then we have the transverse processes. Next, we have the intervertebral foramen. The holes right there. And the holes in the vertebrae and spinal column passes through. Next, we have the body. Right there. And then we have the position of the intervertebral disc, which is right there. Okay, moving on to the lumbar vertebrae. There are 5. This right here, that is the sacrum, and there are 5 vertebrae. And then right here, right on the bottom, that is the coccyx. Okay, focusing now on the sternum. Right here, we have the manubrium. Over here we got the body. Next we have the xiphoid process here. Lastly, we got the jugular notch, which is right on top right here. Okay, focusing now on the ribs. Okay, from here to here, that's the true ribs, or the vertebral sternal. And then from here to here, that's the false ribs, or the vertebrochondral ribs. And the vertebral or the floating ribs are right here. Digging deeper, this is the head of the rib. Next, we have the neck. The neck is right here. Then we got the cervical of a rib, and that is right about here. And the ribs articulate with the vertebrae by the cervical articulating by the costal facet of the transverse process.